Welcome to the Gender in Focus podcast. I'm Elle, and each week I get to ask Kai Scott, the president of Transfocus Consulting, all the questions you have ever wanted to ask about trans and non-binary people in the workplace and in the wider world.
This is who you are, and this is how you'll grow up to be. There's a lot of baked in assumptions and pressures to that name. Dead naming is basically any time you use somebody's past name, and it just tells you the emotional weight that we were talking about before, with which people don't want to hear it. Like that name is literally dead to them. What's in a name? For trans and non-binary people, the answer is so much. In this episode, we explore why chosen names matter so deeply and what it means when others get it wrong. You'll learn how to navigate mismatches between legal and chosen names, how to handle past names with care, and how organizations can protect privacy and dignity when systems fall short. We'll also hear powerful personal stories on how trans people choose their first names and the identity, healing, and freedom that come with it. Let's get into it. I'm really excited to talk about affirming someone's name that isn't just about being polite, that it's actually life affirming. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Elle. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Yeah. And I'm excited to unpack this very important topic that gets a little less attention than pronouns, but I think is equally important.
Yeah, when people think about trans experiences, I think there are not that many conversations about like first names and chosen names and the whole experience behind that. So what is a chosen first name and why does it, what makes it different to a legal first name?
So yes, difference between chosen and legal first name. These are very important distinctions that for some they may not know that this is a thing, but certainly for many trans and non-binary folks, it is at play. So legal first name, I think most people can guess. It's what's on your official government issued ID. Usually it's, the name we were given at birth. And what's really important to note is that our names are often gendered. So they're specific to a particular gender. So if I say the name Anna, we might automatically conclude that this is a girl or a woman, and which is not always the case, but many people assume. And similarly for other types of names. And then our chosen first name, especially for trans and non-binary folks, is one that they choose that aligns with their gender identity, which might be different from what was assumed based on how they were born. And either a different gender specific name or gender neutral name, depends on the individual what's right for them. But in any case, they choose that. And because it's so difficult to change one's official government ID, either it's very costly and or it takes a long time. It's not a very straightforward process. Most staff are not trained in government or other places to change the documentation for first names. They are for last names, but not for first names.
Right.
And so it could last up to a year. It did for me. It took a whole year, and I'm a very organized person. Like my color coded spreadsheets and going through them, very persistent. But still, and for me, between two countries, it cost $1,000. So that's not something everybody can afford, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a pretty penny, and all kinds of things need to be changed: passports, driver's licenses, healthcare cards, degrees. As I started to go in the process, I was like, more and more things. I was like, oh yeah, this needs to be changed. On and on and on.
Yeah.
Anyways, not everybody can afford that. Not everybody has the time because you have to do it during operating hours, and people are working 9 to 5 jobs. They can't get time off, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, so there can be a lag time between when people, if they choose to change their name legally, update it. And so that's where the chosen name is an important distinction from it could be different than the legal first name.
So when it comes to hearing somebody's chosen first name,
Mhm.
and you were saying about how in a lot of cases it is different to people's legal documentation. often that is the sort of legal name is the name that people use most
Mm,
frequently when it comes to sort of like, I don't know, workplaces or just general life. People get to
yeah,
kind of hear that a lot when they're trying to avoid it, really. And so, could you go into why it is so important to use a trans person's chosen name,
mm,
or anyone's chosen name, actually, if
yeah.
they've changed their name?
Yeah, that's such an important question because we in society give a lot of priority to legal first name. Like that has
Hmm.
kind of a weight behind it. And people think it's the official name of any person when
Hmm.
they don't realize the complexities behind the scene and that somebody might be trying to actively change it, but it's very laborious.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, if you're going to any kind of legally based or organization, healthcare, workplace, some of the ones that you mentioned, they're going to rely heavily and maybe only look at legal first name and not even have on their radar to check in to see if there's
Hmm.
a chosen name that's different from their legal first name. And of course, it's not just about trans people. You're right. Other people have either two or more names that they go by. Immigration is usually a big factor in that. People come from abroad and take on an anglicized name to make things easier. Sadly,
Hmm.
I would hope that we could figure it out to use
Hmm.
their actual name. But
For
in any
sure.
case, people make the decisions that are right for them. And so, you know, when there's just this overemphasis on legal first name, it unfortunately puts a lot of people either in a precarious position or just in a very challenging position because that name is referenced over and over and over. And with somebody's legal name that's different from their chosen name, that means it's their past name. So it's
Mm.
attached to the gender that people thought they were at birth. And so there can be a lot of pain associated with that name. So hearing it over and over, or having it referenced, or getting a letter with that name, um,
Mhm.
getting a phone call and somebody says, are you so and so? So just like kind of everywhere you turn, it's there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just presents so many challenges for folks. Logistical challenges are one thing, but there's also the emotional side of the equation.
Mhm. Could you go into that a little bit, like what that actually looks like for folks? Because I think maybe some people don't necessarily even get what the big deal is, and I
Mm,
kind of get this a lot, just sort of on a personal thing. I haven't changed my name or anything, but I do use a
yeah.
shortened version of my longer name, and it's like it's quite frustrating when people refuse to use it. I think that it's like interesting that people don't necessarily think of it as a big deal, but it's so much more than I think people equate it with just having a nickname, right? In a lot
Mm-hmm.
of cases, and it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah, it's the kind of presumption when we're named. Of course, there's a lot of thought and love that goes into it. I'm sure maybe not all families that way, but certainly many of them. And, there's also a bit of presumption in there, right? Of like, this is who you are and this is how you'll grow up to be. There's a lot of baked in assumptions and pressures to that name as well. So it's especially because, like I was saying, it's usually tied to a particular gender. And so it puts a lot of pressure on folks. Of course, not just trans and non-binary folks. I mean, really, everybody I imagine has some degree of this type of pressure. But
Mm,
it's in the name, and it. I don't think we realize how often first names are used. It's like
yeah.
multiple dozens of times a day, and when people, especially if somebody has made the effort to say, hey, I go by this name, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, nah. Maybe not even actively nah, but
Mhm.
just like, maybe if I get around to it, I'll think about it. Or if I remember, I'll do it, but not
Mhm.
with the intentional of like, oh, this is very important to you. And I'm going to take some time to make sure I can make this happen, right? Because
Mhm.
this is really important. And if people just kind of ignore it, that says, I know you better than you. And
Mhm.
even if people don't intend for that message to be sent, that's the kind of some of the subtext of it. And it can be really harmful, especially on a repeat basis, to the point where it can people socially isolate. It's just too much for them to hear this on a loop, and for others not to understand the severity of what's happening. This, of course, parallels with pronouns, but I think there's something deeper about it because it's unique. Like pronouns, it's a set used for
Yeah.
a group of people, but the name given or chosen by someone, that's very intimate. And if it's
Hmm.
shared and then rejected, even if it's not active rejection, if it's like more of an afterthought, it still hurts.
For sure. What
Yeah.
about if there are situations where a legal first name really has to be used?
Mm,
Um, Obviously, there are going to be some situations where it's not enough to just use somebody's chosen name, which is really frustrating. But
sure.
how can people handle that in a way that's still sensitive and kind of respecting that person?
Yeah. I mean, there are a few, I wouldn't say all of them, but a small handful of places where legal names are needed, or
Hmm.
not needed, but they need to be referenced,
Sure.
because it kind of follows a consistency. So people it's attributed. One example is pay stubs, and
Hmm.
many trans and non-binary people are aware of this. It's not ideal, but I mean, certain places, Canadian Revenue Agency probably needs to, figure out a few things,
Sure.
amongst other organizations. I won't say they're the only ones, but, you know, I mean, I appreciate logistically too. You're going to go to the bank, and if that's
Sure.
still in your legal name, there needs to be a consistency there. Now, of course, it's not. That's one of a few places, and when staff who are handling this type of information, there's a few things that they can keep in mind. One is to be aware or even to ask for if there's a different name if you're interacting with someone, right? Just because it
Hmm.
needs to be recorded, it doesn't need to be said out loud, or
Right.
it doesn't need to be active in an interaction. You can actually just point at something and be like, okay, I recognize your legal name is this, but how should I refer to you during our interactions? That's a beautiful question, because then people
Hmm.
like a space has been provided, especially if there's not a field in a system for somebody to provide that. And then now you have this way to build rapport because you're able
Hmm.
to address them properly, irrespective of what's on the document. Another thing is to be really careful about the keeping that legal first name private. So legal names tend to, among many people, not be treated very confidentially.
Hmm.
But because there's a difference between somebody's chosen first name and their legal first name in terms of the perceptions of the genders attached to those, people could figure out if somebody is trans or non binary, right? The
Hmm.
difference between Tom and Tanya, like people can kind of connect the dots. And so
Sure.
let's keep that legal first name as protected as possible. So, not putting it on a directory, right, for everybody to
Sure.
see, or yeah, just or saying it to another colleague that just doesn't need to know that, and kind of burying it, and highlighting as much as possible the chosen name so that somebody can use that properly if they come across that person's file. Those are just a few examples.
Hmm. And it's quite simple, really. You're like not really
Yeah,
asking for a huge system change when it comes to things like that. I mean, of course, there's like system changes that are great too,
sure.
but a lot of that isn't really anything to do with that.
And sometimes systems change takes a while, right?
Hmm.
Especially information systems can take 1 or 2 years to get something new off the ground. And so in the interim, you can still be nice to people. I know it sounds,
Right.
you're right, it does sound simple, but I think people, especially frontline staff, they're handling so much
Hmm.
that, this is probably one other thing that is now on their radar, which is good.
Right.
But I can
Yeah.
appreciate there's so much, like they're like, okay, probably
Right. Yeah.
handling
Fair.
lots of detail and putting out fires and whatnot. But I don't think it's too difficult or too much of an ask. Um, and in doing so, a lot of upset is avoided,
Hmm.
and which can escalate and make work and that person's experience that much more difficult when it doesn't need to be.
So, what if someone makes a mistake? If somebody is, let's take a frontline member of
Mhm.
staff, or even just colleagues and leaders in general, if they have accidentally used the wrong
Mhm.
name, what what can they do
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
kind of repair that?
Yeah, it's so important. What I mean, acknowledging a mistake, just like any other mistake, is really important. I think it depends on if there's kind of two main scenarios. It's if you've never seen this person before and you're just relying on the legal first name, but there's no other field for chosen. So it's like, how would you know? Right. In which case,
Hmm.
you're likely to make an error, not because you weren't aware or you're not trying. You're not set up for success, sadly.
Hmm.
And that's a reality that happens quite often, in which case you just say, oh, my apologies. Thank you so much for sharing your name, so that I know how to reference you properly. Right. So there's
Hmm.
ways to recover, even if it wasn't your mistake. Right. Because sometimes
Hmm.
people can be a bit defensive to be like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's the system. Like, what am I? My hands are tied, you know?
Yeah.
But that kind of approach isn't very sensitive to what somebody is experiencing, not just there, but like so many other places. Like, this is on repeat in a
Hmm.
very awful way. So even just a light touch of like, my bad, or even if you didn't mean to, just like, I'm so sorry. Yeah, we have some system limitations. We're aware of them. We've flagged them. We're working on them.
Hmm.
In the meantime, you can also offer, hey, I could put your name in the comment section here on our system, and maybe that will help, for the next employee, so that they don't misname you. Would you like that? Right? Always
Hmm.
want to ask for consent, um, but that's another option available. The other scenario in which misnaming, or what some people call dead naming, happens. So, dead naming is basically any time you use somebody's past name, and it just tells you the emotional weight that we were talking about
Hmm.
before, with which people don't want to hear it. Like, that name is literally dead to them, right? So that's something that they've put it away, and
Hmm.
gives you the gravity of the situation. So, say for example, you have a colleague that recently came out and said, hey, I go by a different name, maybe even different pronouns, and you're still struggling to, maybe you've known this person for 6+ years, and that old name is ingrained into your brain. There's a natural scenario in which you are likely to make mistakes, especially at the outset, in
Hmm.
which case it's still important to acknowledge that, to be like, hey, I'm so sorry, I misnamed you, and then repeat the proper name. And if it tends to happen quite a bit, it is important to set aside time to practice it. If it's just, if you find yourself having difficulties, there likely needs to be a bit more attention to it, so that it doesn't
Hmm.
keep reoccurring. But quick apology and correction are really, really important.
Can I ask you about how the process of people choosing their name and how trans
Mhm.
people choose their name? Because I think it's not actually done very often. A lot of
Mhm.
people kind of have their name given to them and then that's it. So can I ask you about that? And if you're okay to share your own story, would you mind,
Oh,
of how
for
you
sure.
chose your name?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a minute since I've thought about it, or talked about it, but essentially, of course, I'm not going to give my previous name,
Hmm.
but I was born given a particular name, and it's a big task to think
Hmm.
of a new name, right? To reflect and honor oneself, because of course you're one continuous person, even if you're changing your name midstream.
Hmm.
um, and But also wanting to honor my gender just took a long time. I was One thing that really resonated for me growing up is my friends called me my last name, which is Scott, as my first name. Typically, especially in like
Hmm.
a sports context, people
Yeah,
say people's last name.
it's very common in the UK to refer to people like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, in school.
And, and there's like a familiarity to it. There's like,
Hmm.
camaraderie. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. And also for me, I mean, of course, at that point, I couldn't quite piece it together. Is that it was gender affirming to
For
hear
sure.
Scott, right? I was like,
Hmm.
dang, that sounds really great. I was a little too excited about this. So when I first came out as trans, I was like, well, maybe I'll just I'll take my last name as my first name and then choose another last name. And I shared this with my sister, who was not pleased. And she's like, "You are not leaving the family." She read me the riot act. And upon further reflection, she was absolutely right. So, I had to go back to the drawing board after that. And I was like, okay, so it's not going to be Scott. Fine. What else could it be? And you're reading through different lists and seeing if things pop out at you, or different baby name lists and whatnot. And
Mhm.
I just, none of them really spoke to me, and I was really struggling and putting a lot of time and effort into it because it's a big moment. And of course, I probably don't want to change my name again, given how long and laborious
Sure.
process. And then one day in the morning, I woke up from a dream, and I said out loud, "Kai." And then I went about to look up all the meanings, or look up the meaning of Kai. And there's like 6 or 7 different meanings around the world, and each one of them spoke to me. So in German, because I grew up in Germany, so that felt resonant. It means industrious, which I
Mm.
am.
That is you, yeah.
Little worker bee. There's in Japan, it means ocean, right? So this kind of sense of openness, expansiveness. In Navajo, it means willow tree, which also very
Mm.
powerful, like rooted but flexible. Just on and on and on. Every meaning spoke to me. And I was like, that's it. We're done. So, yeah, of course, every story is different. People come to their names in a different way, but the main thing is it can be a bit circuitous, right? It's not so straightforward. For many, it feels like a big thing, but also exciting and fun. And sometimes you'll have to try a few times. I you know, didn't really use Scott as my first name or tried it out. But some people will try one first name and then it doesn't quite fit. And maybe a few weeks, months later, they try another one, right?
Mhm.
Just to see, it's kind of, yeah, you want it to fit, right? And you don't always know until you start hearing it. So, anyways, it's a bit about my story and more generally the process that people undertake.
I love that you dreamt that. That's so interesting.
Yeah, dreams can be a powerful conveyor of information, and certainly helps cut down the work.
I checked with my friend. I have a friend, Elizabeth, who's a trans woman, and she has a really beautiful story of how her name came to be. Her story is that she obviously had a name before, and her parents had named her, and through her life, they had written her letters. Just it
Mm.
was really sweet. It was like on maybe on birthdays or big events, they wrote letters and they had them sort of in a box somewhere. And I think the plan was to give it to her on her 25th birthday, but
Okay.
when she was 21, she came out as trans and told her family. And I think there was inevitably some nervousness, but I think she
Hmm.
always knew that she was going to be accepted and loved. And so that
Right.
was not a huge concern there. But
Uh,
when she told her parents got the box of letters and found the very
oh.
first one. And it was that we've named you this. And there was
uh,
a lot of other things in it, but one part of it was about the name that they chose for her. And
mm,
they had named her this name, but if that doesn't work for you later down the line, we have these other options too. And you don't have to choose
wow.
any of these, but if you wanted to, you could. And on there was Elizabeth, among a couple of other
Mm,
names that were maybe sort of gender neutral, but also some names that are like traditionally masculine as well, and some other
right.
names that were traditionally sort of that we associate with girls and women.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth was on there, and so she chose Elizabeth. She also chose a middle name from there as well. And
Wow.
so it was still chosen by her family. It was chosen by her parents, and there is
Yeah.
something for her. Like I know for some trans people that I know, it was really important to them that they chose their name and that they got the
Mm,
choice. And obviously, that would have been the case for Elizabeth had she wanted that. But for Elizabeth, for my friend, it was very much that it was very special to her that her parents
mm,
had even considered that that might be an option, and that
wow.
she her parents still named her, she still had that. I think that that's such a beautiful, I think that's the most beautiful story when it comes
Oh
to,
my gosh,
isn't
yes.
it?
I mean, that it's even on their radar and that they made space for it and that
Hmm.
they did the effort, right?
Hmm.
As you choosing one name is quite, especially something that's going to be for so long. It's a big
Hmm.
task and people take it seriously, which is good. But that they added to it is just like
Hmm.
so wonderful. And I think sometimes parents struggle. Parents, during education session, are like, "What do we do about kids? Like, we don't want to force them, and just start, but also be open to
Hmm.
something different. In which case, and not only open, but giving options.
Mm.
Wow, wow,
Isn't that so
that's
gorgeous? I think there's
like,
like a lot of pressure on people who want to quote get it right,
mm,
is that like maybe there is a thought that you have to choose like a gender neutral name in order to
mm,
be sort of progressive, again in quotes.
right,
But actually there are so many options, like even just considering that someone might be trans
hmm,
gives the option for you to, I don't know, I don't think we have to go down the route of making something gender neutral. You can just
yeah.
create the conversation. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that's crucial because, certainly with parents or kids, there are pathways that society has created, right? But the ability to create space even within those streams, I think is really important.
hmm.
And yeah, so maybe that inspires somebody
Hmm. I hope
listening.
so.
Yeah, I when you were sharing about parents choosing, they do. I mean, my parents chose before I was born
Mm.
two gendered names, and the other one, the kind of male or men's side of things, was Richard. So I did
Oh.
consider that, but I was like, I don't know. Richard just very old
Richard.
school, And of course, the shortened version isn't very flattering either. Just couldn't see myself as like a dick. So
I
I was
mean,
like, no thanks.
that's,
So considered.
wow, that's
But
interesting.
one thing I forgot to mention about Kai is that the two first letters, well, there's only three letters in Kai, so it's not very long, but the first two letters are actually the first two letters of my past name or my name from birth.
Mm.
And so that also worked out really well. It's like my parents began it and I finished it, right? So it was still
That's sweet.
collaborative in
Yeah.
that sense. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Kai, you always make everything cute.
No, I
That's sweet.
know. Like trying to think of it all, because of course, like we don't want to, or many people don't want to upset their parents, right?
Mm.
We still want to honor them, but just make a few corrections.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's sweet. I love
Mm.
that. Where can we find you on social media, Kai?
So there's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, TikTok. That sounds about right. There's a few others in there. Basically
Yeah,
choose the one that you like. And we have weekly posts there and really cool educational content, little micro learning moments and interactive questions sometimes. So, yeah, join us.
amazing. Cool. Well, thank you so much and see you
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye for now.